Christians believe that Jesus was a human and God. He was somehow a God-man, God incarnate. But does this belief make logical sense? Let's look into a couple reasons why people have seen the deity of Christ as an illogical belief. First, can miracles happen logically? At the very least, a God-man means that a miracle had to have happened, notably the virgin birth. But is it logical to believe in miracles? Some scholars will say that whereas the ancients believed in the possibility of supernatural intervention, our intellect has evolved beyond such superstitious notions. The reasoning goes like this. The incarnation is a miracle, but miracles are impossible, therefore the incarnation is impossible. Now, why are miracles said to be impossible? The response would be something like, well, if we're looking at the world through the lens of science, we've got to acknowledge that miracles violate scientific laws, and therefore they shouldn't be believed or by scientifically literate people. Or, well, the evidence for the regular is always greater than the evidence for the rare, and since miracles are rare, therefore it's always wiser not to believe in miracles. But, what exactly is a scientific law? It boils down to a description of how the universe usually works. According to these laws, which describe what normally happens, virgins don't conceive and dead men don't rise. Now, sarcasm alert, my goodness, if only someone could have told those uneducated ancient people that virgin births and resurrections go against how the universe usually works. How surprised they would be, right? Actually, science hasn't really disproved anything that the early Christians believed. Rather, it's only reinforced what the first Christians already knew. Virgins don't conceive and dead men don't rise. This was why these early Christians preached these events so excitedly. Were they anti-science? No. They simply had an extra component in their worldview that allowed for miracles, and that was the existence of God. Interestingly, it's not just miracles that fit into a God-centered worldview. The scientific enterprise itself fits best into a world created by God, since science presupposes an intelligible universe in which scientific laws can be discovered by intelligent minds. So are those who reject miracles more scientifically literate than the people who accept the possibility of miracles? No, they simply delete the existence of a personal God from their worldview. Belief in miracles stems from belief in God, whereas unbelief in miracles stems from unbelief in God. The assumption behind the idea that the deity of Christ is unreasonable because miracles are impossible is simply the assumption that there's no God. Yet there's an abundance of evidence that God exists. So that's the first reason that the deity of Christ is said to be illogical. It's that it involves miracles. But again, if we have good reason to believe in God, then miracles are totally possible. Here's a second reason that the deity of Christ is said to be illogical. Isn't a divine human a contradiction? Isn't a God-man unintelligible? In other words, it's been suggested that the deity of Christ is unintelligible. It's a contradiction in terms. Now, unintelligible could mean either contradictory or confusing. So let's look at both possibilities. First, in what ways might a divine Jesus be contradictory? Well, according to Christianity, we start with the three persons who have the God nature, the Trinity. In order to fix humanity's sin problem while keeping their freedom intact, one of the three persons is set apart as the Savior. In the womb of a virgin, his God nature is joined together with the mother's human nature, resulting in a person with two natures. Now, is three persons with one nature a logical contradiction? As in, is there an internal inconsistency in which one fact cancels out the other? I don't see how three persons with one divine nature is a logical impossibility. Well, what about one person, God the Son, with two natures? Is that a logical contradiction? On the face of it, it doesn't seem like a logical impossibility to have a single person with two natures. But perhaps practically this is an impossibility. For example, wouldn't it be a contradiction for Jesus to have both finite knowledge and infinite knowledge at the same time? Or how could Jesus mature into adulthood and yet be eternal at the same time? Now, this may seem like a cheesy analogy, but consider the following statement. I am both a husband and not a husband at the same time. Is this a contradiction? Actually, no, because the two statements hinge on the relationship or the sense in which we mean husband. I am a husband in relationship to my wife, or in the sense of my marriage. I am not a husband in relationship to my brother, or in the sense of my career. And so it goes with Jesus. In relationship to his God nature, or in the sense of his divinity, Jesus has infinite knowledge and eternality. But in relationship to his human nature, in the sense of his humanity, he has finite knowledge. And he grew in knowledge and wisdom. Now, the husband analogy isn't perfect because whereas husband is a role, humanity and divinity are said to be part of Jesus' nature. Is it possible for two natures, human and divine, to converge in the thoughts and actions of a single person? Well, it depends on the nature of humanity. If Christianity is true, then God already made humans with a special likeness to himself, which includes the ability to be rational, moral, and spiritual. Now, granted, humans have chosen to sin, and our rationality, our morality, our spirituality have been damaged. But what is essentially meant to be human is more godlike than meets the eye. Humanity wasn't created to sin. We can desire what God desires. We can act in accordance with God's will. It's not actually impossible that the desires and actions of God could parallel those of humans as we were created to be. Jesus is sometimes referred to as the new Adam, as in Adam and Eve. He's the new Adam, Romans 5. So now it's true there is an infinite chasm between the infinite and the finite, between creator and creation. So if the two natures were to unite in one person, one would expect to see glimpses of both natures, an interaction of humanity and divinity. We would expect to see Jesus acting as God and yet submitted to God. We might expect to find Jesus teaching out of an infinite reservoir and yet learning. It wouldn't be out of bounds for him to give life to others and yet die himself. What we should not expect to see in the God-man is that thing which turned humans into a ghost of our intended glory, and that's sin. And we don't see Jesus sinning. Yet in a grand plot twist, we do see a sinless Jesus extract sin from all of us. So is a divine human a contradiction? I don't actually see how it's a contradiction. But isn't a divine human, a God-man, isn't that at least confusing? I suppose it is confusing. Some questions are tough to figure, such as how could Jesus go all of his life without sinning when it's hard for regular humans to go a day without sinning? It took the church a few centuries to kind of iron out what it meant for Jesus to be one person who is fully human and fully divine. These questions can be confusing. But when something is confusing, does that mean that a person is foolish to believe it? I certainly hope not, because most of what I believe confuses me at some point in the process of understanding. I believe in the existence of music, love, gravity, email, but I wouldn't be able to explain them very thoroughly. When it comes to God, I actually think it would be foolish to assume that God and his ways shouldn't be confusing to us. If each step of Jesus' incarnation were broken down for us in a simple 1, 2, 3, it might very well seem to be made up. This is the nature of God we are dealing with here, the inner workings of his mind and his nature. Shouldn't it be enough for him to tell us that the miracle happened? Do we really need to know how it happened as well? By joining the human and divine in Jesus, no contradiction is committed. Is it confusing? Perhaps. But is God really obligated to make it simpler for us to understand than, say, photosynthesis? He's not, and so we really don't have grounds to complain. A better response is to allow the deity of Jesus to move us as it moved his disciples. Matthew 14:33 says, "Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, 'Truly, you are the Son of God.'" This is Daniel McCoy with KAPOL and Contact Mission.